Bible worm, reading the Bible, Bible worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, here each week with Dr. Robert Williamson. We are Bible scholars and people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian. Bobby is a professor of religion at Hendrix College in Conway, Arkansas. He was just promoted to full professor this week, actually. Mazal tov, Bobby. He is also the founding pastor at Mercy Church in Little Rock. I'm the executive director at Congregation Beit Haverim in Atlanta. Together, we are Bible Worm, digging around to see what's out there. This week, we read 1 Corinthians chapter 13, Paul's famous passage on love as a sort of diagnostic check of our motivations in our attempts to live lives of faith. We talk about love or lack of love across the political aisle and about the limits of love's patience in the face of injustice. We talk about the importance of doing a serious gut check about where you yourself are drawn with real love and the necessity that you lean into that, even if your acts of faith may look different from someone else's. We wonder what Paul would have to say about social media. Well, actually, we can guess. Hope you enjoy. Good morning, Bobby. How's your pandemisphere?
My pandemisphere. That is my new favorite word. My pandemisphere is very small and a little claustrophobic and includes a rather moody toddler. How's yours?
Similar, but with tweens and teens.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Right on.
Okay,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Sounds good.
Today we are reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. But let's reground ourselves in where we are. What is happening? What do we know about what's going on in the church community in Corinth that we should bear in mind?
Yeah, so last week we were looking at the very beginning of 1 Corinthians where Paul appeals to them to find a unity. They're a group in disunity, and Paul is saying, look, you've got to reclaim this common core of the tradition that you have, reclaim your identity in Christ. And then really, the rest of 1 Corinthians in the rest of chapter 1 through 11 is kind of sorting out all the sources of disunity in the community. So in chapter 12, which is immediately before this, Paul has this really well-known image for the unity of the body of believers, which he refers to as the body of Christ. And what he's trying to do in that chapter is think about how each member of the community has gifts that they bring to the community, and all of that together makes up the community as a whole, which is the sort of manifestation of Christ in the world. And so he says, like, some of you are an eye, and some of you are an ear, and some of you are a hand, and some of you are a foot. And you can't say, I wish we were all eyes, or I wish we were all feet, or I'm an eye and I'm going to take...
That'd be so creepy.
Yeah, right. There's a massive eye rolling around. I can't
Isn't
go
that
anywhere.
in Ezekiel, something covered in eyes? Okay.
Oh, yeah. The wheels with eyes. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
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 And so he's tried to say in the previous chapter, look, we all have different gifts. And if we bring our gifts together, then we can actually be a body that makes some sense. But if we try to separate ourselves based on we think seeing is better than hearing, then we're going to end up with a body that can see everything but can't hear anything.
So now we come to 1 Corinthians 13, this very well-known exposition of love. And here we go. We ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. NRSV, 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. So we already know that Paul's not a fan of fancy speech.
That is true.
Do you think that's what he's getting at in this first verse?
I think that's half of what he's getting at. So if I speak in tongues of human beings, I think that's talking about, so
that's
speaking.
yeah.
It's either speaking in multiple languages or it's speaking eloquently. I think either one of those kind of interpretations is reasonable. And then the second part of that, the tongues of angels, he's referring to the spiritual gift of glossolalia, the ability to speak, like actually speak the language of angels, which is a spiritual gift that seems to be particularly important in Corinth. And Paul elsewhere in chapter 14 claims to be like really good at it. So here I think you have these two, like if I could speak fancy human talk or if I could speak the language that the angels speak, but without love.
Interesting.
Yeah, do you have thoughts about that?
No, I mean, my main thought is I have in my head the teacher from the Peanuts cartoons going, wah, 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 wah. That, like, who even knows what she's saying, but nobody cares because no one's listening. That's what I think Paul is talking about, the Peanuts teacher.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And then it's kind of remarkable to say that, like, even if you can speak the language of angels, it doesn't, like, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like, speaking the language of angels is seriously, like, Pinterest-worthy worship skills.
Yeah, I mean, in some traditions today, still, that's sort of, in the more charismatic traditions, that's still kind of the marker of a true believer. I mean, this is not Presbyterian. Presbyterians would not know an angelic tongue if it bit them on the nose, you know? But in some more charismatic traditions, that still is a high mark of ability or like of Christian commitment. Yeah. And here it's saying, I love the image of, in the CEB, it's clanging gong or clashing cymbal. It's not just not important, but it's like loud and it's like
distracting.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes it hard to concentrate. Like it pulls you away from things that do matter.
Okay. So I can see how that relates then to the second verse, which again, like prophetic powers and understanding all mysteries and all knowledge and having this tremendous faith to be able to move mountains.
Right. Yeah.
Like those seem like they would be things that matter.
Yeah. I love the way this little passage progresses. So it's, first of all, it's these, like the ability to say stuff. And now it's the ability to do stuff. And you're exactly right. Yeah, this is, it's not that you're doing silly or ridiculous or pointless things. Like you are a person of such prophetic
tremendous
capacity.
Faith. Yes.
That you can see deep into the mysteries of the universe. And you're a person of such faith that you can say to that mountain, move over there, and it'll move over there. Like these are things that we hold up in the New Testament as like, I mean, this is really important to be able to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if it's not done in love, and Paul's like, there at the very end of verse 2, I am nothing.
Yeah. And then, I mean, again, this last one, hasn't Jesus said you should give away all your possessions and you should, like that's supposed to be good.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Here you have somebody who's actually able to do that. And Paul says, well, actually, if you do that, but you don't do it in love, then it's like you haven't done anything. In the second half of verse 3, so there's the giving away of everything. In the second half of verse 3, it's the handing over my own body. And so this seems to be something about either martyring yourself, either literally or figuratively, or, doing these kind of like risky self-giving things. And that also is in this category of having no benefit. So when you take these things together, like what I like about it is it kind of catches all the ways in which people kind of enter into faith communities in ways that are ultimately self-serving. So people who talk real fancy, people who are like, hey, look at what I can do with my faith, and people who are like, I can give myself completely away. I think most of us would find ourselves in one or another of those categories. To the extent that we are attention seekers in our faith communities, we can find ourselves in one of those three categories. And Paul has said all of them are nothing without love. And so he's not singling out one kind of way of entering into community in self-aggrandizing ways, but he's found 3 or 4 different ways of getting there.
In Jewish teaching about prayer practice and all of religious practice, there are 2 categories, kavanah and keva. And kavanah is your intention, is sort of your mindset as you are engaged in your practice. And then keva is the thing you're supposed to do, right? You are supposed to recite certain prayers, and you are, there are things you're supposed to do, but you have to have the right kavanah to do it. And so one of the struggles that every Jew has, and maybe Christians have as well,
is the balance between kavanah and keva.
Yeah.
When do you follow the keva, even if your kavanah is not quite right? And when do you follow your kavanah, even if it means your keva is going to be a little bit off? So I guess part of what I see in this text is there's a lot of like very demonstrable acts of faith.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of visible practice, kind of showy visible practice.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have the kavanah, which in this case is described as love.
I really love that. I think that's so helpful, the way to think about it. The problem is not that they're kind of it's not that they're not invested. The problem is that they're super invested in ways that point back at themselves. So they're like, these are awesome community members if all you're doing is like looking on paper at it. These are people with the gift of speaking in the tongues of angels, with high rhetorical capacity, with the prophetic ability to move mountains, who give everything they've got to the ministry. These are the superstars of the community. And Paul is saying, if you're too into it, you need to go for a walk in the woods and think about what you're actually doing.
What are you doing?
Yeah. Why are you so into it? Yeah. And
Yeah.
what's your orientation?
I mean, it really does make me think about Pinterest and like, come on, I live with teenagers.
You might have to help me a little, because I mean, I know
they're not on Pinterest anymore.
I know what Pinterest is, but that's about where it ends for me.
So, okay, say for example, and I hate to say this because it sounds much more judgmental than I feel about it. I don't feel judgmental about people who take pictures of their healthy meals that they're making for their family and putting it up. Like, sometimes that gives me good ideas, and I want to, I think you can do that for good reasons, and it can be a good and helpful thing. And I think sometimes people get so concerned with their image as a loving and health-conscious person that image sort of takes over.
Yeah.
Right? The image takes over.
Yeah.
I don't know that Paul would like social media.
He would love podcasts, though. He would be so into Bible Worm. Yeah. Whew.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Starting in verse 4. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things.
Yeah.
This part moves so fast.
Yeah, because each of those things is like huge by itself. And then you just kind of get this string of them. Like it's a really high bar for what love looks like.
Yes. And I wondered, as I was reading it, is this like instructions on how to be loving? Or is it like how to recognize love in the wild? Like, that was love, and I know because, I mean, it could sort of be both, but...
Love in the wild, I like that. The way that I have read this is sort of like the diagnostic check for your own action.
Okay.
So with the keva and kavanah that you were talking about earlier, maybe this is kind of the way of checking the kavanah, right? Am I doing this in the right orientation? And here's what it looks like in its ideal form. And then you hold up your own kind of orientation and you compare those two.
Okay, so if we start at the beginning here and we're trying to get our diagnostic check for our action.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
What would you pull out of verse 4? What would you expect to see?
In my mind, I feel like Paul kind of goes straight for it here. Like patient and kind. Like I think like, okay, like I feel like I achieve often patience and kindness. Not always, but that seems like a doable thing. But as soon as we get into in the CEB, it isn't jealous, it doesn't brag, it isn't arrogant. Mm-hmm. I start to think like, like I really want people to like notice that I'm being loving and like talk to me about how loving I am.
Wah, wah.
Yeah. What do you think about that list?
Again, sort of going back to these categories that I know from Jewish teachings, the idea of patience and kindness for me, in Hebrew, patience is savlanut. And it's really related to the idea of bearing a burden, like that every relationship you have to other people or to the community or to goals or to anything has a weightiness about it.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. Like we want that weight that grounds us and it's meaningful. And sometimes it feels really heavy.
Yeah.
So the goal is not to throw it off when it feels heavy, because if because then you've severed the relationship.
Yeah.
So being able to sort of endure through unpleasant moments
Yeah.
in relationship to the world around you.
Yeah.
So in 4, we got some basic attributes, and then 5 continues that thought. So we already know it's not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful.
Yeah.
I fear that Paul might have been peeking in my window in my interactions with one of my children yesterday. My own irritability.
Yeah.
I can't help but notice that not insisting on your own way and not being irritable or resentful, in some ways, that's just an exposition of what it means to be patient and kind and
Yeah.
humble,
Yeah.
right? It's just, and what I mean by patient and loving is not to be irritable and resentful. And what I mean by
Yeah.
humility is to not insist on your own way.
I love that way of reading it. Yeah. So here's the kind of general principle, and then here's the let's get down to brass tacks about it. I definitely, when I was reading verse 5, I was like, oh my goodness. I
I know. I wrote in the margin well, I'm convicted.
Yeah, because in the CEB, that last line is it doesn't keep a record of complaints. And, it's funny, to me, that's one of the things, when somebody does something to me, and I have a list of things that they have done to me in the past in the back of my head. Yeah. So it's interesting to me the way Paul, he puts his finger on things. And I think, maybe this is just me, but I feel like he's putting his fingers on things where people can identify in one way or another with things that we do that are not loving in the definition.
Yes.
He's trying to inspire us to something better, some better way of being in community.
Okay, you ready for verse 6?
Yeah.
It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth.
The CEB, it isn't happy with injustice. To me, that one comes a little bit out of the blue. I was really struggling to think, who is happy about injustice? Do you have thoughts about what Paul's thinking there?
Now I'm wondering if this is really just sort of the juxtaposition of rejoicing in truth, whatever that truth is, versus trying to hide the truth. I don't know. Is injustice or wrongdoing the opposite of truth?
So is what you're kind of working on, happy with injustice, is seeing what you can get away with when the truth not coming out works to my advantage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I like that reading of it. Yeah. So I'm happy with the truth. Love is happy with the truth, even if the truth
It's not to your advantage.
is not on my side. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think the Schadenfreude reading is kind of an interesting one. And, we live in a cultural moment where people are always owning the libs or, owning I don't know what the opposite of that is, owning the conservatives, I guess, where we rejoice when bad things happen to our political enemies oftentimes. But if you could
sure
think
do, don't we?
Yeah. And you can think of that in
really
all
do.
kinds of, more personal ways too. But yeah, we should not be rejoicing. If we were truly loving people, we would not be rejoicing when bad things happen to people we don't like.
That is true. That is true.
I love verse 7.
Yeah.
In the CEB, love puts up with all things. I don't love that one. Because that comes back to your enduring. Sometimes being loving means you got to put up with some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But trusts in all things, hopes for all things, endures all things. I love that kind of expression of this is faith, hope, and love again, right? We're going to come around to this again, but trust in all things. We have faith that all the things are going to be all right. We have hope because of the faith. We have hope for the future, and because of those two things, we can put up with whatever is going on right now. I love that kind of way of framing what love is.
No, that's really helpful to me. When that verse at first to me read as that's very passive. Meh,
Yeah.
I believe everything. I endure everything.
Yeah.
I hope for everything.
Yeah.
Yours is better. I like your reading better than mine.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because there is a really negative way of reading that, and believes all things can
you're not actually supposed to believe all things.
Yeah,
I don't think.
in a world of conspiracy theories, saying what we should hold up is believing everything you hear is not great. Yeah.
Yeah.
The believes all things, the Greek verb is pisteo, which is the verbal form of the noun faith. And which is, so it's different than like cognitive
has faith
process.
in all things. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so the way that I read that is, in all things that happen, we are oriented by faith, which gives us hope, which lets us endure. Yeah.
The only other note that I would add to that, I think, is, I spoke earlier about patience as savlanut in Hebrew, and the idea of bearing a weight.
Yeah.
And actually the word for the burdens of the Israelite slaves in Egypt is sivlot, is related to savlanut.
Yeah.
And the idea is that the reason their slavery ended is that they called out because they could no longer bear those things. And so the teaching that comes to the Jewish tradition from that is, except in cases of injustice. Like, you should not bear injustice in the world. That's not an issue of patience.
I love that. Thank you for adding that. Yeah, because one of the things that I have struggled with, and when I teach this passage at Mercy Church and other places, is exactly that. People take this to mean we should let stuff happen to us.
You should lay down. Just let stuff happen. Yeah. You ready? Should we move on?
I think so. Yeah.
Verse 8. Love never ends, but as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, and the greatest of these is love. So the first half of this section, love never ends, but then it goes on to the things that will end.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that? Prophecies will come to an end. Knowledge will come to an end. What is he getting at?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are happening there. I mean, there are a couple of different ways of reading it. One of them, in my mind, is about the gifts that you yourself have are limited by, really by the time span of your life. And so, love continues on, this connection of the community continues on, but your capacity to prophesy, your capacity to speak in tongues, these things they have a timestamp on them. And so love endures where other things don't. The other thing that I think is happening in this passage, and it gets stronger and stronger as the passage goes, is this kind of eschatological expectation of the inbreaking of the kingdom of God and ultimately the fulfillment of that kingdom. And so once God has come in God's glory, there's no need for prophecy, there's no need for tongues, there's no need for knowledge. But God is love, and so those things will continue on even when the kingdom of heaven is fully realized. Those are the two ways I kind of get at that. What are your thoughts about that?
I love that. And it made me think of a poem. I don't know if you've ever heard it. When All That's Left of Me Is Love. So it's a poem by Merritt Malloy. And the idea is that when someone dies, what is left of them is the love between them and other people, right? It's sort of like love is a force in the universe that your life creates that continues beyond the span of your life.
Yes.
But I love that idea that there are gifts that we have that come and go with us, that exist during our lifespan. But love is sort of this mystical force that we have the ability to bring into the world, but it doesn't leave with us.
No, I think that is a beautiful way of thinking about what Paul is getting at. Yeah. So thinking about what you're putting into the world that contributes to something beyond yourself.
What do you think about this idea that just comes right after what we read, but that what we're doing is only partial?
Yeah.
And then once the complete comes,
the
partial comes to an end.
So I think that what Paul is thinking about there is this idea of the way that I have said it is the inbreaking of the kingdom, that there is some kind of reign of God that is on its way, that has sort of partially arrived, and it's partially arrived in the community, which is the body of Christ. But that's not the thing, right? That is the language we sometimes use is a foretaste of the kingdom.
So it's not that you're really like building up towards something. It's that something's coming sort of from outside of your efforts and you're trying to plug into it.
Yeah. And I think what Paul is concerned about here in particular with this, like when I was a child, I thought like a child, I spoke like a child, but now I'm a man. I think Paul is thinking there about child and adult in the faith. So I'm a baby Christian versus I'm a mature Christian. Mm-hmm. And when you're a baby Christian, I think what he's saying is you think you get it. Like you think you are doing all the things, like the kingdom has fully arrived and it is present in you. And so you're super gung-ho. You're on fire for Jesus is the language that we sometimes use. And then as you get older in the faith, as you mature in the faith, you realize that what you're doing isn't, like you're not even getting close. Like what you're doing is...
I love that. I love that it's not that when you're young, you think you're the greatest and you get everything, but you don't. But then when you're older, you do.
Yeah.
It's that when you're older, you have this sort of conscious incompetence, right? You're aware of all the things that you don't know and can't do.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And the reason I think that Paul thinks that is because in verse 12, he puts himself, now we... So he's not saying you see in a reflection and I see it the way it is. He's saying we see a reflection in a mirror, then we will see face to face. So he's put himself in the category of not seeing completely, but he knows it. I like that. He is consciously incompetent. Yeah, I like that. Whereas the baby Christians are unconsciously incompetent. They think they get
that's
it,
such a
don't.
delightful phase to be in, unconsciously incompetent. I
mean, it is full of vim and vigor, right? Whatever that expression is. Like, people really love being in that phase.
Thinking about the different roles that people in their different phases of spiritual formation might serve.
Yeah.
That having that energy, that vim and vigor, as you said, in a perfect old man kind of way, having that in your community is a good thing for your community.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you might not only want that in your community. Yeah. And, similarly with folks who have been around the block and are, have a better sense of what we don't know and how complex the world really can be.
Yeah. And that might not be a bad thing. Like, you just got to figure out what your purpose is and fill it with love. Yeah.
Yeah. Fill it with love. I mean, I think that's really the end game of this chapter.
Absolutely it is. Yeah. And you get that in this last verse. Now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. So all three are important, faith, hope, love. But if you got to pick one, love's the one. Which is not necessarily what one might think, right? Like, oftentimes, especially in Christian circles, like faith would be the one. Like the thing that matters most of all is that you have faith.
Yeah.
And here, Paul, that's not what Paul is saying. Paul is saying the thing that matters most of all is that you have love. It's also important that you have faith and hope, and the three go together.
Right.
But the love is the one. If you're put in a position where you gotta put all your eggs in one basket, it should be the love basket, not the faith
and you
basket.
Can't fully perform acts of faith or acts of hope if you don't have love.
This is why at the end of last week's podcast, I get a little snarky sometimes, as you may have noticed. But when I said this passage is famous, but for all the wrong reasons, what I meant by that is this passage is often read, exactly in wedding services, where it is about romantic love between two people. And I think that is a reasonable extrapolation of this passage. And I think it works in that context. But I think that is a dim, mirrored reflection of what this passage is actually doing, which is talking about the love in community that has its origin in God, animates the community, and then points the community back toward God. And it's talking about what is life like with people that you share a faith community with, but you might not always like them or like really want to be in a community with them.
Well, and that for me, that is a really important part of what it means to be in community.
Yeah.
It's different than your group of friends.
Yeah.
You know, being in community does not mean that you get along perfectly with everyone in your community. You probably do not.
I think that's exactly right. And I mean, and Paul, for the last 12 chapters, has been talking about how much the Corinthian community does not get along with each other, right? Mm-hmm. They do not want to be in community together. And Paul is saying, you are the body, like you don't really have a choice. And you need to, like, the way that you learn how to be with each other is love is the first thing that motivates. And this is what it all looks like. So if you oriented yourself to the community differently, then the community might be a better place. Like, yeah, instead of pulling yourself out of the community, maybe what you need to think about doing is reassessing how you enter into the community.
There's so much in here, Bobby. I mean, are we ready to move to talking about teachings? Do you have anything else you want to?
No, what I was about to say is I think this passage is so rich that I don't know how to take a takeaway and say, so here's what, so here's what this means for us today. Like, I mean, what this means for us today is we all ought to be thinking about our kavanah, the way we enter into our practice, and whether it is or is not loving. And this is the measure we ought to be holding up to ourselves. And that's going to look all kinds of different ways for all kinds of different people in all kinds of different situations. And I don't know how to talk about that in a pithier way. So can I put the question to you first?
I mean, you can, but I think you're right that part of the beauty of this section is that it will hit people in all kinds of different ways. And there are a million different things you can pull out from it. At this moment, being in a shelter-in-place situation with my family, it strikes me mostly as a parent.
Yeah.
I feel tempted during this time to try to accomplish all kinds of things during this shelter-in-place so that I have used my time well and I can reflect on my accomplishments and feel good and in control and like I've conquered this time in some way. Like it makes me feel in control of things.
Yeah. And
part of that fits uneasily is there's a lot of folks sort of circulating these pithy memes or whatever that are like, think of how your children will reflect on this time later.
Yeah.
And what they will remember.
Yeah.
Will they remember fun time out in the sprinkler with their parents, or will they remember their parents were frantically trying to, work while baking bread and starting a running routine and learning a new language?
Yeah.
I think it is helpful for me to step back in that way and say, what will my children remember about this? And what will the feeling memory be? Will they feel my love in their memory? But at the same time, I feel like that itself has become something to accomplish. That people are posting on Facebook about their loving interactions with their children like it's competitive. It's a love competition.
Yeah.
It's really hard to extricate yourself from that and do a really serious personal gut check about where you find those points of loving connection with the people around you and leaning into those and making sure that it looks however it needs to look for your relationships.
Yeah.
Within your community or within your household. And then maybe not posting about them on Facebook so you don't have to look at how many likes you get.
Yeah. You were making me think about, like, Paul has given us a really high bar right here. And one possible way of processing this chapter is to think of all the ways in which we are not loving and to like hold ourselves to an impossible standard that makes us feel bad about ourselves and actually creates more anxiety in our communities. And to me, that's the danger of this passage. And I feel like you've said it really well there. We can get into a love competition. And I mean, I don't think Paul intends this to do that to us.
I'm sure he does not.
As you were talking, what I wanted to say is like, Amy, you are doing well enough. Like you're doing the thing, right? Don't be so hard on yourself.
Fine.
Yeah. The other thing that you've kind of, like thinking about the time of the pandemic and like, what are all the communities that we're involved in? And, when we're reading text together, I am tending to think about faith community. And you are often thinking about family as your primary context, which is really interesting to me. And then to realize that, well, there's also like a larger societal community that's out there too. And like, what does it mean to be loving toward our larger communal context in this moment when we are kind of driving each other a little nuts? I mean, I don't know quite what it looks like to love, American society, or to love like the community of Arkansas or Little Rock or Atlanta or Georgia. But there are a lot of people who are part of my community who are driving me a little crazy right now, and that I feel like are not acting in loving ways toward the vulnerable and people who are economically disadvantaged, and, this kind of rush to reopen and putting people's health at risk. And that leads me into things like feeling some sense of satisfaction when somebody gets the coronavirus at a open up the society rally and ends up in the hospital. And I think, haha, you got what you deserved. And this passage is making me realize that that's not, like, that is a tendency that I have, right? That is not a beautiful and loving tendency. Like, the way that we're going to make it through this thing is to realize that we all belong to each other. And the only way that it works is if we all act in loving ways toward the other. And I feel like in my own mind, I feel like we are far, far from that at this moment.
I mean, I think you're right. I think that's the question. How can we be loving, even if there are ways that we can't quite be loving right now?
Yeah.
How can we lean into the ways that we can?
Like, I think one of the ways Paul is contextualizing this is within the Christian community anyway, our little Christian communities ought to be kind of a dim foretaste of what the kingdom of what the reign of God is going to be like. And, and in that way too, maybe our families ought to be that as well. So we cannot suddenly transform the culture at large, but we can be really thoughtful about the ways in which our families and our friend circles and our faith communities are embodying these principles, which can be a reflection for the larger culture about what it means to be loving in this time. And, if enough of us are working on that, then it really can be transformative for the culture as a whole. And so I tend to get overwhelmed by the big picture. Like I was just doing, like, oh my God, like what do we do?
No, but you're right. I mean, I think that is the only way we can create larger transformation in our culture, is to start with the smallest group we can, start with ourselves. Move out to the people we live with, move out to maybe our friend circles, and then our faith communities and our,
And our public witness. Yeah.
This is a good text, Bobby.
It's such a good text.
I liked this one.
It is a really rich text.
Next week, we are still in Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 15.
Yeah.
And the summary, the title given to it by the narrative lectionary is Death Swallowed in Life. So it sounds very exciting.
It is very exciting. Yeah.
But I look forward to swallowing death next week.
We should say before we go that Bible Worm is over the summer, once we have wrapped up narrative lectionary, we are headed into a 10-week series on the 5 little festival scrolls, the Megillot in the Jewish tradition, Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. And so that, I think, begins the first Sunday in June.
In June, yeah. It's coming right up.
Which is coming faster than I would like for it to. So we're going to do a 10-week series, 2 weeks on each book. If you are somebody who is preaching these texts, we'll post our sort of summer lectionary in our Facebook group. And on our Facebook page, which, by the way, is facebook.com/BibleWorm podcast. And Amy's also going to post the poem she was referring to earlier there.
Oh, yeah.
So come and look at that. For those of you who might be interested, I have a little book on those 5 books of the Bible called The Forgotten Books of the Bible, Recovering the 5 Scrolls for Today. And we'll be using that as kind of a reference point for our conversations. And so...
It's a great book.
Thank
really
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that book is not necessary to understand what we're going to talk about in our summer series, but it could be a nice point of reference
Yeah, especially if you want to preach on these texts.
All right, Amy. Well, hang in there.
Thank you. You too. I hope you have a week full of Pauline love. And I will see you next week.
All right. Take care.
All righty. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Bible Worm. We are so glad you've been here with us, and we hope you'll be back next week. Take good care.